Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Neighbors demand I move my plane. After that, am I the jerk for refusing to show proof that the car is mine? And after that, my brother hits on my ex, gets rejected, and shows his true colors. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen gets rejected. You didn't reject me, Reddit boy. Don't ever do that again. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Neighbors demand I move my plane. I live in a cottage that I inherited after my grandfather passed 3 years ago. The cottage is one of the oldest homes in the area, and unlike my neighbors, I'm not a member of the HOA. The cottage itself is a waterfront one, in which I have a small grass yard that turns into a beach on the lake. I never had a problem until recently over his seaplane and buoys. Due to having a private pilot's license and being really fortunate, I own a Piper Super Cub on floats. When I'm not flying the plane, it's either docked to my dock or is pulled up onto the beach and strapped down when the weather is bad. A month ago, I decided to make some new additions to my property. These additions were 2 lines of buoys at the edge of my property with signs on each. The buoys extend 15 feet past my dock and are still technically on my property. The signs themselves are ones that I got custom made warning about prop wash. I decided to add the buoys and signs because whenever I take my seaplane out, there are sometimes boaters and kayakers who will stop to watch me leave. Normally this is not an issue if they keep their distance. However, recently they've been getting too close for comfort. With the addition of the buoys, I can keep a 100 by 300 foot safety rectangle. This makes it so that at the bare minimum, I will always have around 100 feet off of each wing of safe space. Additionally, it prevents people from cutting me off when I come to dock or park on the beach. About a week and a half ago, I got a letter from the HOA. The HOA is demanding I move my plane to a local seaplane base, as well as remove my buoys and signs. In response, I wrote them a letter explaining the reasons behind having the buoys and told them I have no intention of changing anything. About 2 days later, I got an angry visitor who was an HOA member. I told her that if she or the HOA comes onto my property again, they will be arrested for trespassing. Before leaving, she used some very colorful words and called me a jerk. Not the jerk. Yet another HOA thinking they can flex on their neighbors. Forget them. Totally not the jerk. But get cameras and a lawyer on retainer. You're likely in for an annoying ride with the HOA, even though you're within your rights. Not the jerk. You mention in other comments that you have documentation on your ownership that proves the legality of your actions. I would hire an attorney and stop replying to them yourself. Have the attorney send a letter to the HOA to kindly stop harassing you when you are not part of their HOA, and that any harassment will be reported to the authorities. If you can afford it, set up cameras and let them know any trespasser will be recorded. Info. Are you 100% sure that what you are doing is legal according to the property laws of your county, state, or country? Where I am, private property does not extend out onto the water like that. If you are in violation of any ordinances, laws, codes, etc., you would be the jerk. If not, then not. But this is a more nuanced question than just whether you are subject to the HOA or not. OP. Yes, I know for 100% sure, as I have all the paperwork, including the documents that show which portions of the lake I own. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the neighbors? Please let us know. I wonder who invented HOAs, and if they had any clue how many lives they'd be impacting for the rest of eternity. Am I the jerk for refusing to show proof that the car is mine? For some context, my 20 male, mom, who's 38 female, married my stepdad, who's 35, 10 years ago. They had my brother, who's 8 years old now, Scott. I see my stepdad as my father and his family as my paternal family, so I'll refer to him as Dad and my step-granddad as Gran. So Dad has a GTR that my Gran gave him a few years ago. That car is really cool. He also has a normal car that he drives to work, so the GTR is more for fun and showing off. My bro and I love that car, and my dad lets me drive it whenever I want. He even added me to the insurance when I turned 19 because I used the car almost every day until I was able to buy my own. Last week, I noticed Scott a bit sad, and he said that some kids at school were bullying him. Our parents went to his school to talk to the principal, and the problem is somewhat fixed, but he was still bummed, so I decided to surprise him yesterday by picking him up in our dad's car. I parked the car and got out to wait for him. I was sitting in the trunk when a guy approached me and said that I shouldn't sit in other people's cars. I laughed it off and said that it was mine, so it wasn't a problem. I must admit that I do look younger than 20, so he might have mistaken me for a high schooler and didn't believe me. He said that the car couldn't be mine and that I should get off of it before the owner gets back. I said that it was my car again, and he got mad and said, "Look, son, this isn't your car. Get down. I'll even take a picture or two of you with it." I was getting nervous, and when I get nervous, I tend to laugh, so he thought I was mocking him and yelled at me to get down, that if the car belonged to me, to show him the proof. Then he yelled that I was trying to steal the car. I asked him to leave me alone because I was waiting for my brother, and he did move a few meters, but then I noticed that he was making a call, and it turned out that he called the police on me. My brother was getting out at the same time. He was really happy to see me there in our dad's car and ran to give me a hug. I tried to pick him up to put him in the car, but the guy stopped me. I opened the door. It was obvious that the car was mine at that point. Either way, the police came and asked the normal questions. I explained to them that it was my dad's car, and the guy said, "Ha! I knew it wasn't yours." I showed them proof, my license, my dad's papers, the insurance paper with my name on it, and even a text with my dad where I said, "Hey, I'm gonna pick up Scott in the car." And he only answered with an "okay." I offered to call him so that they could ask him themselves, but they said there was no need. The police let me leave and scolded the other guy. Before driving off, the guy called me a jerk because I could have just shown him all of that, but instead I preferred to be a jerk. Not the jerk. He had no right to do what he did, just a nosy Parker. And why would you show him proof it's your car? He should have just minded his own business. OP. For real. Like, that thing has my family's address, my dad's full name, and his number. No one in their right mind would show that stuff to strangers. Not the jerk. This is what happens when people think they can get away with policing people without actually being police. Not the jerk. That's sketchy. I'm a girl, but imagine someone pestering me and wanting proof. Your license and registration has some personal information on it, and reading that immediately gave me stalker vibes. Probably not the case, but just a point about how weird this is. Or if else, I'd be concerned about them trying to find your address to try and steal your car. Just doesn't seem right to share personal info with a stranger. OP. That's what I just said in another comment. That little thing has some serious personal information, and I also thought that, what if I show it to him and now he knows where the car is? I would have put my parents and my brother at risk. It's not like I was down in the car cutting the breakers or trying to break the windows. I was just sitting waiting for my bro. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you show the stranger proof that it's your car or not? Please let us know. I'd start coughing and sneezing all over him. Trust me, it's one of the quickest ways to get people to stop pestering you, especially these days. My brother hits on my ex, gets rejected, and shows his true colors. I, 22, male, have 3 older siblings. Diana, who's 43, Sebastian, who's 37, and Jake, who's 32. I was the surprise baby, and I'm closer to Jake than Diana or Sebastian. Now, Jake has always been interested in sports and all, training since he was 14 and went pro in college, so even at 32, he looks like a young Schwarzenegger. And I took after him because he was the sibling at home who I was actively watching. I was young and desperate for interacting with my siblings, so I did a lot of needy things. I took baking classes with Diana. I watched every stupid Star Wars movie so I could talk to Sebastian, and I became the Rock at 18 for Jake. I'm not that needy anymore, and I never really talked with Sebastian. He claims that the reason he gets rejected is because of his looks. He's okay, a little bald, a little overweight, but also very grumpy and noisy. He thinks Jake and I are stupid just because of how we look. He really doesn't have another reason. Jake has a PhD, and I'm top of my classes, but we're stupid because muscles. I've been laughing at his disrespect and resent for years, but now that I'm a bit older, I just cut him off and move away from him. It's sad because he's my brother and I want a relationship, but nah. I was in a casual relationship with my girlfriend at the time because I don't want anything serious in my 20s, and a few months ago, my girl had to pick me up from my parents' house and I introduced her to my family. Next day, she said that Sebastian sent her the most disgusting messages on Facebook that she had ever received in her life. I read it and it was something. He called her beautiful. He said he knew we weren't serious or official and asked her out on a date. 20 minutes later, he asked if she was there. 10 minutes later, he asked her not to show me the text, and 10 minutes later, he spent the next 20 minutes insulting her until she blocked him. We agreed not to tell him anything because she said she didn't care, and that was all. I broke up with her and removed myself from her house. I'll be living with my parents for at least a month until I find another apartment. Sebastian is also living here, and when I went through the door, he laughed at me, called me a kicked-out Chad, and that even when I look like a little Jake, I still got broken up with, and now I know how he feels when people reject him for his looks. But that it's better because my looks are the stereotype, and I just rolled my eyes and said that his looks aren't the reason women run from him, but rather his creepy personality, and to remember the text he sent to my ex a few months ago. He got red in the face, and my mom said that I was rude because Sebastian is already having a bad time being his age and living at home. This is 100% why he's single, and he shouldn't dish out what he can't take. Also, how did he get her number? Or was this Insta DMs? Either way, it's bad, but still. I hope you find an apartment ASAP, because he sounds insufferable to live with, to be honest. OP. He had messaged her on Facebook. Not the jerk. Sounds like he needed a serious wake-up call. People like him who just like to blame the world and their looks for why they can't get hookups, yet fail to realize it's just their crappy personality are annoying. It's his own fault that he's living at home and can't get a girlfriend. Instead of taking his insecurities out on you, he needs to be an actual adult and get a job and also work on himself. Otherwise, he's just going to be a miserable person forever. There's so many dudes who are a little balding and a little overweight who easily find partners. Ultimately, most people aren't that shallow and appreciate someone who treats them well or makes them laugh, regardless of their looks. Pretty much no one appreciates an unsolicited come-on from their boyfriend's brother, especially if it's followed by mistreatment. Sure thing, boss. I will follow the GPS. I drive a concrete truck. We deliver ready-mix concrete throughout a fairly large area. Keep in mind, concrete has a shelf life of 90 minutes once water mixes with the cement. This is very important on specific jobs. Our company uses a routing and tracking system I will call the terrible system. If there is a good route or less than good route, it chooses the worst route of all routes possible. After working with it a short time, this was noted. During training, new drivers are told to use it for final part of route only. Problem is, every time one doesn't follow a route, an alert is sent to management. Early in using terrible system, managers found a way to turn off these alerts. New manager starts. After a year, he brings up in meetings that drivers are not following the terrible system routing. Multiple times we tell him it gives us the worst and longest routes. He doesn't listen. After 6 months, he states drivers will be written up if we continue to not follow the terrible system routing. Drivers don't listen. A few days after this announcement, a fellow driver is written up. This is talked about. Cue malicious compliance. Next day on my second load, I have a load to a location I've had before. It's 15 miles east of the Pan and then a 10-mile north leg. Following that route takes about 45 minutes or less. We had been going to this job site for 3 months by this time and knew terrible system gave a much longer route. I was first truck of 4 and noted on the radio we needed to follow terrible system route as directed. Off I go. Route it takes me is southeast 13 miles, north on Interstate Highway 35 miles, including a chicken coop, way station for non-truck drivers. Trucks are chronically overweight for interstate. East through a large metro area for 20 miles, followed by last leg south of about 15 miles. Takes 125 minutes for me. Terrible system gave estimated travel time of 140 minutes, so I did well. I arrive as I'm timed out. Rejected, and that cost company $1,000 for the concrete, not to mention 20 gallons of fuel I burned. Second and third truck are the same. Fourth truck was stopped at chicken coop and company had a $500 fine. Customer is upset, calls the manager screaming. Manager asks to talk to me. I tell him we followed the terrible system routing as directed and he can check that easily. Next day in the break room, there's a sign posted stating that drivers are to use professional discretion in choosing the best and most expeditious route to jobs. My brother-in-law gets scared and cries to his parents when I correct him. So my brother-in-law to this day still lives with my in-laws. He's in his early 30s. From what my wife has told me, and I've seen enough evidence to affirm her statements, they've spoiled him rotten his entire life. He could burn water, he's that inept, eats nothing but crap food, is horrendously overweight, doesn't have a job, and actively refuses to get one unless you're doing all the legwork for him. Gets to go out to Disney and Universal parks all day and throws a tantrum anytime he's asked to do any kind of chores, just to name a few of the issues I have with him. He's also super creepy towards us, and given his history that's not really mine to explain, that's grounds enough for me to not want him within a mile of any of us. He still demands their respect because I'm an adult and your uncle, so you have to respect me. But I have to put up with him because I try not to rock the boat as much as possible. My wife's relationship with her parents is rocky enough as it is, a real-life Cinderella story. We got married in mid-2015, and her parents invited themselves to our place on base housing to come see our new house. Of course, they bring entitled man-child with them. This jerk has already been stuffing his face with what little snack foods we've got in the house. Didn't ask for my permission because we're family, and families share what they have when family visits, or something like that, some crap my mother-in-law said. Not too long after, he starts going off on my 10-year-old son. A grown man being a jerk to a barely double-digit aged kid by calling him names. I'm still new to the step-parent / new husband role and don't want to overstep, so I let my wife start to handle this. She asks him to stop as it's upsetting our son. He does for a little bit, but goes right back at it a few minutes later. Once again, my wife asks him to knock it off and says that this behavior won't be tolerated in our home, and he starts having another of his ungodly tantrums. As soon as, "Well, Mom says," comes out of his mouth, I put my foot down, both literally and figuratively. I do not tolerate any disrespect towards my wife. Strangers, kids, or family be darned. The new house is mostly wood flooring on the first floor, and my voice already carries pretty well, so the entire house goes silent when I spoke up. "Is this her house? Is this yours? No. Then shut up when the people whose house you're in tell you to knock something off." Entitled jerk is just standing there looking like some flabby fish out of water, with an open-mouthed gasp and wide-eyed terror that someone had dared to correct him. He then ran upstairs and cried to my in-laws about how he was aggressive and scary towards me, and I don't feel welcome in this home. Gee, I wonder why. My father-in-law pulled my wife aside and demanded something be done about my behavior, because that's no way for family to behave towards one another. She told me all this, and to this day, I still don't apologize for anything they deem as rude or unseemly, because that one instance of their son's behavior tells me that they have no room to criticize anyone on parenting or general behavior. Another reason he may not like me would probably be because I embarrassed him for acting like an idiot while we were on vacation. For context, we were staying at a hotel her parents had booked with their points, and I was on crutches at the time for a broken foot. This jerk had my daughter up in the air, spinning her around, standing immediately next to a pool. Obviously, I could not ambulate fast enough to intercede physically, so I had to call out from across the courtyard, "Hey, put her down, now!" which drew everyone in the vicinity's attention to his idiocy. I finally get over to him, and he's looking all kinds of indignant. He asks, how dare I interrupt his time with his niece, and I tell him, "Because you're putting her in danger, you colossal moron. You're not even a foot from the side of the pool. What on God's green earth made you think that this was an okay idea?" "Well, I'm her uncle," was all he had to counter with. "And I'm her father, and I said put her down." Now he and I get into a hard staring match at this point, and he thinks he's gonna win because I'm on crutches and he's already naturally taller than me at around 6 foot. I, however, was a hard-charging Lance Corporal at the time and didn't fear man, beast, or God, let alone this excuse of humanity. He broke first and stormed off to go tell his parents what happened. They try to have a conversation with me about how what I did was inappropriate, and I just balk at them and ask them how they could condone the blatant endangerment of their granddaughter by this buffoon. They had nothing else to say. Am I the jerk for showing off after my stepfather kept telling everyone I was poor? I, early 30s female, have 2 kids that were born when I was 21 and 22. My daughter, the eldest, was an accident, but my second daughter was deliberate, as I found out that I needed a hysterectomy due to medical reasons, and being an only child and psych major, I believed it was important that my daughter had a sibling. At the time, I had recently, amicably, split from my partner, and my stepfather was strongly against me further ruining my life by having another kid due to his belief that you cannot be successful as a single parent. I ended up going no contact with my mom, stepfather, and 2 half-siblings at the time they were 10 and 9 over this. My stepfather is in no position to talk as he and my mom are far from well off due to his gambling addiction that chewed through my mom's savings prior to his recovery. About 2 years ago, my mom reached out to me as she was diagnosed with cancer. She came through it and is now in remission. I am not as close with them as I used to be, but things have been improving. However, my stepfather keeps going on and on about how I never made it because I don't have a nice car or a fancy apartment in the city or a husband, and insisting that I must be poor because I'm not materialistic. I got used to being frugal in my early 20s when I was a poor uni student with 2 kids and just never really changed. I have a very nice government job with a 6-figure salary where I work from home, but I drive a 2009 Nissan and I own a nice house in the country because I don't see the point in buying a city apartment that I don't need or a flashy car that will have some crappy KMS to L ratio. Things came to a head at a recent family dinner when I told my mom about a budget place to get tires from. Hers are almost bald. And my stepfather said, "Good to have a poor person in the family so we know where the deals are." I got upset and told him to stop assuming things about me and walked out with my kids. Yesterday, I notified them of the $60,000 trust I have set up for my half-siblings' uni trust fund and took them to buy a vehicle each so that they can get to uni. Both are starting this year. I deliberately left the windscreen price stickers on so my stepfather would see how much I spent. Today, my stepfather called me ranting about how I was showing off and how I should keep my mouth shut and respect my elders. My mom texted to say that he's furious at her for ever contacting me. Am I the jerk here? Edit to add. The trust I've been putting together for a while because I know my half-siblings won't get financial support from their parents, but the cars I did purely out of spite. Not the jerk. Your stepfather's behavior is ridiculous. He's the one causing your mother's stress, not you. Her mother was unfortunate to marry such a materialistic jerk. OP is not the jerk. She proved her stepfather wrong in a reasonable way. He's just embarrassed. You're a naval officer and we will show you the respect you deserve? Yes, sir. Hello, folks. A while back, I was stationed in Pensacola, Florida as a trainee for learning to be an IT for the Navy. Every morning, our class would meet at the end of a long stretch of walkway where we would march as a unit down to our classrooms building. Now, this base is primarily manned by enlisted personnel. For the uninitiated, we are the lower-ranking personnel, and when we encounter an officer, we are required to render a hand salute. Most officers that set foot on this base know that they are outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and as such tend to avoid the enlisted mob, as not to draw unwanted attention as massive herds of people are forced to stop what they're doing, render a salute and greeting, and you have to do the same. Cue our brand new lieutenant. For naming anonymity, and because I like Forrest Gump, I'll change his name to Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan was a jerk and would regularly park his car near where we were forming up, stroll by our formation, and lose it on the new folks that didn't notice. One time his exact words were, "I am a naval officer, and you will show me the respect I deserve by rendering a hand salute." I swear it was like he rehearsed this spiel in the mirror before showing up that morning. What Lieutenant Dan did not know is that us lowly enlisted folks are petty. What he also didn't know is that sometimes on rare days where it was too hot in North Florida to safely march in formation, we would all be allowed to walk ourselves home down the long 1/2-mile stretch. Well, one summer day, with maximum humidity and heat, so hot you could fry an egg on the concrete, we all were allowed to walk ourselves back to the barracks. As we are walking in the distance, my class sees that all too familiar stride of Lieutenant Dan coming our way. A plan is hatched as we begin spacing ourselves out several meters apart and marching one by one down towards him. I was one of the middle of the pack folks, and as I got to see the look on his face as the first salute and polite good afternoon was rendered, followed by another one soon after his arm went down, then another. By the time he got to me, he was sweating. He even shouted at us, "You don't need to salute." Try as he might though, our class decided that day that all 20+ students in my class and a few others nearby would render him his proper salute during the sweltering half-mile walk down the path. I can't confirm this or not, but apparently he was pretty upset at the end, losing it pretty loudly. His uniform was all stained from sweat. All I know is from that moment on, when we saw him park his car, he would get out, look at our class, and walk well around our class out of hand salute range. Gotta love the military. Am I the jerk for telling my half-siblings my grandparents owe them nothing? I, 17 female, live with my mom, stepdad, and 3 younger half-siblings who are 10, 8, and 7. My stepdad also has 2 sons who are in their 20s. My dad passed when I was a toddler, and his family have been a huge part of my life and have kept his memory alive for me in a way my mom was no longer comfortable doing after she remarried. My paternal family also spoils me a little. My grandparents have a savings account for me that my dad started. They've bought me stuff when my mom and stepdad were struggling, and the whole extended family have told me I always have a place with them if I ever need it. So my stepdad's ex-wife and her family have been nice to my half-siblings over the years. Sometimes they even bought them stuff and extended the offer for access if his sons were doing stuff with their maternal side. My paternal family have never. I don't see anything wrong with that. It makes sense to me even. They're not super close to my mom, and I'm their grandchild, not my half-siblings. I don't see it as something they should do. My mom and stepdad have always been bothered by it and have allowed my half-siblings to expect it. At Christmas, when I went to spend some time with my extended family, the oldest of my half-brothers ran out before I could and asked that he and the others be included and adopted into the family. He said he wanted them to be in their family too. My grandparents were the ones who picked me up, and they had no words. I ran my half-brother back inside. My mom told me it was a fair question. My stepdad has tried more than once to sever that kind of access with them, but my mom knows grandparents' rights would be granted if they cut us off, and she also knows I would never forgive her if she tried. I told her not to make me choose because that would be enough to make her not like the answer. I told my mom and stepdad they need to explain to my half-siblings that they're not entitled to be included. They refuse. And so when my half-siblings whined a couple of weeks ago, I told them straight. My family are not their family. They are not obligated to include them, and they need to stop because it will never happen. They were so upset, asking why my family didn't like them when their brother's family loved them. My stepdad was furious at me for talking to them about it and being harsh. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Your mother and stepfather should have shut that down years ago, and they know it. It's not your grandparents' fault that your mother and stepfather struggle at times, and they should be grateful that his ex-in-laws have gone above and beyond by financially supporting their grandkids' half-siblings. Your half-siblings should have been told years ago that they aren't your grandparents' family, that they never have nor will they ever be, and that their grandparents are their father's parents and your maternal grandparents that you share. Sounds as though your stepfather doesn't like the fact that he can't control your grandparents and hold you hostage until they agree to his demands of taking on his kids as their grandkids as well. He also needs to realize that neither your grandparents or his ex's extended family owe his kids anything at all, and at the end of the day, his kids are his responsibility, both financially and emotionally. The more he tries to push this, the more both your mother and him risk ruining your relationship to the point of no return. Seriously, it's sad and pathetic when a kid has to do the parent's job for them because the parents refuse to do it themselves. OP's paternal grandparents have made it clear that they don't want to have a relationship with OP's half-siblings, so letting the kids beg and plead is disgusting because the grandparents have said no multiple times, and it's just upsetting the kids more and more each time. You're not the jerk, and your parents are bratty and raising bratty kids. How are you the only mature person in that house? Your mom couldn't be bothered to facilitate a relationship with your deceased father's family when she remarried, and she wants them to include her kids? She's ridiculous. I'm shocked by the lack of empathy in these replies. A 10-year-old seeking love, affection, and inclusion from someone they believe to be a family member is not entitled or bratty. Do you guys hear yourselves? They're being a kid. No, 10 years old is not old enough to have magically worked out by themselves how their blended family works when none of the adults in their life have made an effort to explain it to them or to make them feel settled and secure in the relationship as they stand. These kids likely feel unsettled and distressed from the confusion of why Big Sis seems to have, in their eyes, another family who doesn't include them, especially because the late father, which would explain the missing link to them, is not spoken about. OP, your parents are jerks for failing to provide your siblings with clarity and understanding of their family structure, as well as for failing to support the memory of your father. However, OP, it sounds like the way you have phrased this to your young siblings was a bit harsh. I imagine he's confused and hurting from this mess, which isn't your or his fault. He's also probably jealous of his big sis, who I imagine he looks up to and wants to be included with. Is there a gentler way you could phrase this to him or the other little ones if they ask you directly again in the future? I wish you all the best, and I hope your mom and dad see this as a wake-up call. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk for the way she treated her step-siblings or not? Please let us know. If your dogs are service dogs, what tasks are they trained to do? Guest checks in last night into one room, claims to have found problems in the room and wanted to be switched. She claims that the room was all dirty and they found someone else's clothes in the room. Afternoon guy switches them to another room, but they fight with him to get a room with an outside door. They stay the night, bringing in 3 small dogs with her, despite our hotel not allowing pets. But she says that she told the guy last night that they were service dogs. I get in the morning, knowing none of this, as there is no note regarding a dog in any of the rooms. But I know there is one somewhere because a different guest came up to complain about dog poop sitting in the hallway at night. I clean up the mess. Thankfully, it wasn't too gross or anything, but don't know where the dog was. Checkout time, 11 a.m. The housekeepers report that one room has dogs in it, multiple dogs. Naturally, 2 and 2 together, so I charge our fee to their card and call them to inform them that they have to leave because we don't allow pets. Oh, but these are my service dogs. You have to accept them. Well, your service dogs pooped in our hallway last night, meaning it isn't trained properly and we are allowed to exclude it. They take a while and a couple of reminders to leave, but they eventually do, coming up to the front desk for a receipt. At that point, they notice the charge, which was signed for at check-in. You can't charge me extra for my dogs. They're service animals. You need to take this charge off. Ma'am, as I said before, a service animal has to be trained to not bark randomly and not go to the bathroom where it shouldn't. You can't tell me how to deal with my dogs. They're service dogs. Okay, what services do your dogs provide for you? They run around at my feet, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. That isn't a service dog. That's being a dog. They took my manager's business card and will probably call corporate, but they left. Going into the room afterward revealed that their well-trained dogs had started to tear up the edges of the carpeting, which will need to be replaced. When I showed this to my boss, charge them and put them on Do Not Rent. Already done. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.